Gardening is a learning process, and I've decided that next year, I think I already had decided, but this is a Corvette here, turning orange. Excuse me. I've got about 4 more, and because Corvette is such a short vine, I'm extreme. It's almost like a bush pumpkin. And because it is so short vine, I'm going to put it in the containers next year and have Racer Plus growing around the containers. And I'll show you the type of container. I have about 6 of these. And they're pretty big, pretty deep. Really, pumpkins don't need deep containers. They don't have deep root systems, but the bigger the container is, the deeper it tends to be. This one's really good for one big tomato plant. If you grow the tomatoes in other containers like this, they tend to die faster, and also they don't get as big. So yeah, this one's on the way out. Really got attacked by something, but that's okay. It's the end of the season. So here, this is what I changed my mind about, really. This is Fooled You jalapeno, and I know I said just last week that I wasn't going to grow it next year because it tastes like a green pepper. Well, what I did is I stir-fried another bunch of them. Losing one here. And I found out that some of them do taste like green peppers, but some of them taste like jalapenos without the heat. So and people are liking the idea. They think it's funny. So I will grow one plant next year. 1 or 2 plants. I'm also going to grow Melrose, which you already knew, the Melrose pepper, and probably 4 of those, because they do produce very slowly. So that's Melrose over there in the green netting, and 1 Tam jalapeno, because they're very productive. People are liking them, so we'll have the 1 Tam jalapeno that's over here. Definitely going to grow, and I've been saying this every week, Bush Champion cucumber. And yeah, little sunflowers, so forth and so on. So we have the 1 viable pumpkin that's ripening. There's one in the garage that was a magic lantern, and I don't know if it's going to last. There is a magic lantern out in the garden that's orange. It's the 3rd one to turn orange. That one's not going to last. But I'll show you the magic lantern that is going to last. I'll be right back. Okay, here it is. It's very small. It is pie pumpkin size. So that's the one that's going to last. As you can see, it's been sprayed heavily, and that's why it survived. It was deliberately got to the point where it was killing squash bugs. Speaking of squash bugs, they, I think I mentioned before that they live, I better move the camera over here because I'm sitting in a different place. They tend to live in mulches, so I know a lot of people mulch their pumpkins, but I would rethink it. Another thing I found out this week when researching pumpkin diseases is that a lot of the diseases live in weeds, various weeds in your garden. And you should keep your pumpkin patch well weeded, which I've never really done because it's a pain. Because the weeds can carry viruses to the pumpkins. And viruses, there's about 3 or 4 of them. This little bush pumpkin in front of me, Corvette, is not immune, but resistant to a lot of viruses. It's the only pumpkin I've ever seen that says it's immune to, at least the people who sell it say it's immune to certain viruses. They're not immune, resistant. That's another thing I have to mention here before I go further. No pumpkin is immune to disease. A lot of them are resistant, and that's usually the bush or short vine pumpkins or medium vine pumpkins. They're bred for resistance to certain, well, in this case, Corvette viruses, but usually to powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is the single biggest disease problem with pumpkins. There's also bacterial wilt, but as I mentioned last week, that's carried by insects, and insect control will prevent it. Powdery mildew usually shows up in late July in zone 5 or early August. It's a white, almost fuzzy stuff on the leaves that kills the leaves and then kills the plant. It can kill it within a couple of weeks. There are measures to take against it. Certain people are now using hydrogen peroxide and saying they're having success. I've had some success, but I haven't had powdery mildew yet this year, so maybe because I'm already using using hydrogen peroxide, this is the reason that I haven't had powdery mildew. I don't know. So hydrogen peroxide, excuse me, I can't talk this morning. And some of the other things I've seen used are sulfur, which is in Ortho 3-in-1, and Be Safe. Now, Be Safe, one of the other things I found out about insects and disease, I didn't know this, but aphids carry disease and they attack pumpkins. Now, I've never seen aphids on my pumpkins. I've seen them on my roses. But if you see aphids on your pumpkins, Be Safe is excellent for killing aphids and also warding off powdery mildew and other diseases. So you can try that. So what else here? Another thing with powdery mildew, I know people say to mulch to prevent it. Mulching does not prevent it. It's airborne. So really mulching in a pumpkin patch I don't think is a good idea. That's just my current opinion. It could change by next week. So anyway, that's about all I've got to say about pumpkin diseases. I can say you may not run into viruses if you keep your pumpkin patch well weeded. You may still run into viruses anyway. Some pumpkins are just prone to everything. You can cut down on powdery mildew. You will run into it. It will happen. But you can cut down on it by spraying things like sulfur and so forth. There's also a I had forgotten about it. I haven't used it in a couple of years. There is a chemical that you can spray that's used in making beer. And let me stop the camera for a moment and try to find, I know I have some, so I'll be right back. Okay, it's potassium bicarbonate, and there is a product actually that has that in it. However, it's extremely expensive. What stopped me from using potassium bicarbonate is that it's hard to mix. It's a powder, and you mix it into water and you put it in a sprayer and blah blah blah. It's hard to mix. It doesn't stay mixed. It ruins your sprayer. At least in my case, it did. It's safe, like Bee Safe. It's safe to use from the beginning of the season. It doesn't appear to harm bees, but I still wouldn't spray it directly on them. And it does really postpone powdery mildew till the very end of the season. So that's the single best thing I've found, but it's also the single hardest thing to use. I tried to get around it last year. Of course, I lost everything last year with my pumpkin patch because of the squash bugs. But in the future, I'll use it. I still have some, and I'm sure it's still okay. So yeah, that's the single best thing to use on your pumpkin patch for powdery mildew. Nothing prevents it totally. Nothing will get rid of it totally. No pumpkin is immune to it. They are resistant to it, some of them. And you can find that out by reading online or looking at the package. It's described as PM resistant. But there are ways around powdery mildew, even though it is a major problem for pumpkins. So, that's this week's lecture on pumpkin diseases. And I'm trying to think of what I might lecture on next week. I know there are things that I've said earlier in the season that I disagree with now, and that happens to be a lot. So stay tuned. I'll be back next week with another rant, I'm sure. Talk to you later. Of course there's a PS. It's me. There's always a PS. Something I found out during the week. Hubbard squash is a great trap crop for squash bugs. So I'm going to be growing it next year where my poor little vining pumpkin is this year. And that is way over there. As you can see, it's not happy at all. So that's Howden pumpkin. So I will be growing a trap crop next year, and also around my containers and my Corvette pumpkin and my Racer Plus pumpkins, I'm going to be growing catnip, because catnip apparently it deters squash bugs. So yeah, I read this online in a couple places, and to me, always reading it in more than one place online is important, if it's not accepted wisdom. But anyway, I already had some pumpkin vines growing right next to catnip, and I checked them for squash bug eggs, and sure enough, on the vines that are closest to the catnip, within feet, not yards, there are no squash bug eggs and very little squash bug activity. So I will try that next year. No, Lord knows I have enough seed, so I'll try that next year. And also, one lady was saying that a certain type of radish, white icicle radish, will deter squash bugs. I'll try that too. I think I read it in a couple of places. So yeah, my pumpkins will be growing with companion plants next year, but no weeds. I've gotten better about that this year. So yeah, that is my PS, and I will see you next week.